So SoftBet is basically a B2C operator and a B2B operator. So we run a wide-scale operation. And obviously responsible gambling is something that is very important for us. For me, and I think for SoftBet itself, responsible gambling is making sure that our players gamble within their limits. It's beneficial for the company, it's beneficial for the players. We want them to be happy. We want us to make sure that we are lower in risk. So that is for me.
I come from SoftBet as well, together with David. I'm the head of compliance. I worked for over 10 years in this industry, and specifically with compliance and responsible gambling. And responsible gambling is something I'm personally very passionate about, because I think it's a commitment to responsible gambling is the only way to ensure the longevity of this business. And responsible gambling, to me, is a commitment both from us as operators and also from regulators, a joint effort, I think, to ensure we provide a safe environment for players to play and mitigate the risks that comes with the product.
Interesting. Linnea, thank you for having us today, and thank you all for joining us this beautiful day, this time spending at the casino or by the pool. So I'm Jerry Willovich. I'm from Blackpool. I've been involved in this industry for the past 6 years. Also doing gaming, also Forex. This is why I think mild support we have in this event here. For me, responsible gaming is striking the right balance between what the player wants, what the operator wants, between, not pissing too much off the regulators and sort of imposing self-regulation on the industry itself.
Interesting. So, actually what we see is it should be a win-win for the operators as well as the regulators. We provide a cohesive environment where it's fun. I saw a fact at the casino. A casino is an entertainment. Don't look at it as a source of income. And establishing those kind of benchmarks is something I think that we're talking about is under the responsible unit. So now when we are seeing this sector moving, really like every geography in some or the other way wants to attract the operators in their markets, of course within the framework of their regulations, because the user base is increasing, the income and revenue increases. How do you see which geographies do you see are really progressive in this, and some geographies who are a little behind, they're taking some time, and why do you see so? Are there any cultural nuances around accepting iGaming in any specific geographies?
There's countries that implemented gambling and it's very much embedded in their culture. You look at the UK, horse racing belongs to the Queen. So it's embedded within the culture. That means that there is a long history and a long chance for the people within the industry in there to make sure that their regulations and rules when it comes to responsible gambling and anything that relates to gambling regulation as a whole is much more substantiated from new regulations that only emerged and are now either copying, which is not that bad, we're probably going to get to that later on, or they're trying to create their own regulations. Obviously, history and experience brings you into a better situation. So I guess Europe right now is much more substantiated than other territories like Asia or South America or even Africa right now, and even the US if you think about it.
Having a solid licensing system is to our benefit. So any country that is re-regulated on a local scale ensures that we can continue to operate within that country long term. And obviously looking at the regulation itself, is it a regulation we can work with, where we can settle our business, and is it a regulation that works for players as well? In some countries, they do this better, I think. I think Denmark is, to me, a good example of a country that has a long relationship with the gambling industry, that has a good regulatory framework, that has a good understanding of the industry, and knows how to regulate and supervise the industry. In some countries, we see, unfortunately, regulation that might be implemented due to political influence and maybe with not a great understanding of how the industry works or what the player actually wants.
So I do see some cultural differences between, more established cultures that have, gambling either culture like Asia, like UK, and we also see, let's say, more new regulation of Ontario recently. There's some increasing regulation in the US. They even have, their own affiliate licensing regime, for affiliates to market services to operators. I think it's a little bit of both. It's it's both cultural differences, it's both what some political forces involved, and also, of course, what the player wants. We're seeing that Curaçao is a little bit of turmoil nowadays, and operators are seeking for alternatives. We're seeing, what the operators or the Philippines will prefer Anjuans, etc.
Whenever new industry starts booming, one topic that emerges the most is standardization. Okay, if this is going across the globe, can we expect a standard set of rules? Or if some geographies coming together, let's say the Southeast Asia or the Asian region comes together, and these are the rules under which we operate. For the gambling business, do you see a standard operating procedure coming into place anytime in the near future, considering the cultural differences, Jania, that you highlighted, and every geography, every country having a different perspective about how they kind of look at regulating their population? Do you see a global standard anytime coming in the picture?
I think so, and I hope so, honestly, because it makes my job easier. It makes it easier for the business to adapt to regulatory requirements, to build a product that is coherent between jurisdictions. It eases the burden of development when going into a new jurisdiction. It eases the burden of operational teams learning new procedures and having different procedures. And I do think that when it comes to responsible gambling, there are some core elements that doesn't differ too much between cultures. In terms of protecting players, like having proper safeguards in place, knowing how to detect patterns that are more at risk from an operational point of view, and also the kind of technological controls that we offer players, like deposit limits. These are, I think, pretty standards, regardless of culture. I think it's better when we don't see too much sort of creative input that might not be based on proper research in countries. I do hope so, and I think that regulators look at each other, they learn from each other, and they see, what has worked in the past. So I hope so.
I completely agree. I mean, there's a set of standards or a set of procedures that you can implement in any regulations. Obviously, there's cultural differences that you might need to adjust one element from one regulation to another. But you do see self-exclusions or limitations or, limitation on deposit or wagers and things like that are pretty much widespread across the whole industry. When the regulators copy this and create some sort of a standardization between when it comes to the product itself and then to the mechanism, that would be great. Of course, you can play with it from one regulation to the other, but from a technical perspective, and that's what we're trying to do as a platform provider as well, is to create those facilities, to create those technologies that will allow any operator in different regulations. You just plug in a number and changes. It's better for the operators, it's cheaper, it will convince them to comply with this even more, and it's better for the industry as a whole because it creates clarity. The problem is that when a regulator respectfully thinks that he's creating some sort of a creative solution which creates technical challenges and ambiguity when you come to implement it, that becomes a problem. And that is a challenge. This challenge always translates to an issue later on down the road. So creating a standardization is obviously important, whilst having the understanding that there could be differences. Framework is good.
Right. Absolutely. And Kia, switching gears, when we are talking about, regulatory frameworks, everything, what are the economic benefits you see? The more streamlined regulations, and let's say, what all of us are really looking forward to, some standard operating practices comes out from different geographies. What kind of economic benefits, as well as the second, the social benefits of it? What do you see? What are the benefits that may come out economically as a business? If these things have to come into the picture.
Well, I think one of the best examples of that is, once the U.S. started regulating gaming revenues with the state grew exponentially. We see, more investors acting, inclusive, paying players their winnings. It sort of sets the standard for let's say, market standards. Operators are, working adequately. And I think it seems like a good example worldwide, because everyone, try to match that. And, if everyone is working on the same level, working, collectively as one industry. So I think it benefits everyone because, then regulators are less keen on, imposing like really harsh restrictions, and, it allows potential operators to work, with some leeway.
There was few research on the changes of gambling during COVID-19, and they said a little bit differently. There was one in Sweden from the Lund University that actually showed that there wasn't a real impact of increase in gambling during COVID-19. So I think that it's intuitively, you think that if somebody maybe spends more time at home, somebody's already vulnerable, spends more time at home, that obviously may be more susceptible to maybe play more. But the studies showed a little bit differently. Us as an operator, we took the assumption that people might be more vulnerable and obviously continued implementing proper controls for monitoring of players. And there was also the COVID restriction in Sweden, which put a cap on deposit limits as well for players. Also, not necessarily a measure founded in research at the time, but this is obviously something that we complied with as well. One thing is for sure is that gambling as a business and a product is more protected when it comes to pandemics or things that affect offline businesses, like the restaurant industries. So it was more safe to work within gambling for sure. But yeah, these studies varied a little bit across the board. We took the controls we needed during the time.
Interesting. For industry like gaming, for industry like gambling, right? Just taking the example forward, Elizabeth, the point that made after COVID, we saw a surge, and of course, as a business, you want to grow more. So how do you connect these dots? What is the procedure that you follow to make sure that the business is growing, but at the same time, we are doing it the right way?
Yeah, actually, I don't see this as a barrier. I think this is a normal practice in every business. We need to know exactly how to maneuver between regulation. It could be in gambling, but it could easily be in any other industry. So having this clarity from the regulation is very important. All we need to do is just to make sure that we align our product to comply with these regulations, to comply with this requirement, to comply with the industry standard when it comes to responsible gambling. For us as a business, it's actually very, very efficient because we can identify the risk, and identifying the risk can help us grow bigger, right? On the other hand, if we have a regulatory environment and it doesn't create that clarity, I can go on a later stage and be tackled with a situation that I haven't foreseen in advance, and that is a major setback. So I think that all of this goes in a single path. It's important for us to have that regulation. It's good for us because it then makes us understand what the regulator is expecting from us. We can assess the risk, we can design our product in a way that will comply with this and that will be attractive to our operators, to our clients as well. So,
thank you so much, David, Elizabeth, Gina, for sharing your perspectives. I'm sure the audience had a great insight from that. Our speakers will be here. Please have them off our stage. And thank you so much once again.
thank you.
Thank you.